I'm not going to. You know. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Local Development Framework Subcommittee. I think we've got a number of people who are used to council meetings, so if I could just ask members and presenters, before you say what you're going to say, you can just say who you are, so because I'd hate members of the public to sort of, what on earth is that? What are they going on about? So I'm Mark Simpson, Deputy Chairman of this committee and Chairman of the Planning and Development Committee. The first item that we need to go through is the evacuation procedure. For those of you who are not aware, we are not expecting to have a fire alarm or any other test this evening. So if you do hear the alarm sound, it's likely to be a real event. If that happens, please leave the building by the nearest safest exit, which is almost certain to be that door just behind John Winter. So it's really good to see you back in the council chamber, John. And please go to assembly point G in the car park, which is just outside those windows there, and stay there until Mr. Tobin says it's safe to do anything else. Please just don't go home, because otherwise Mr. Tobin will have to come around chasing you to let the fire brigade know that you are actually safe. Please remember we are broadcasting live on YouTube. So whatever you say is going to be recorded for posterity and everyone else to hear. Agenda item number 2 is apologies for absence or members away on council business. I have one apology from Councillor David Riley, and the substitute is Councillor Colin Hayfield. Are you all happy that we note the apology? Thank you. Thank you. Do any members have any disclosable pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests?
Do we have to say that we're from Dawn and Bosworth, Forest Counties?
No, I'm
Obviously,
okay.
we've got interest.
Yeah. I think you have an interest, but you're here representing the interest,
Yeah.
so that's fine. Agenda item 4 is the minutes of the LDF meeting held on the 25th of April. Are the members of the committee happy that I signed those as a true and correct record?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Now we move on to the important stuff. The presentation from people from Dordon on the plan. So I'm going to hand over to Mr. Tobin. He can run over the rules of engagement and all this, but then it's over to you. And absolutely welcome to the council, Mr. Tobin.
Unlike many applications, we don't have a set time limit for presentations. Those are very strict rules, and people are limited, basically for or against applications to hearing. The intention tonight is for a presentation followed by questions from members for clarifying matters. And Chair, would you like to suggest a time limit for the presentation part and then go on to questions? Would you like to suggest a time period for the whole process?
I was told it's going to be about 15 or 20 minutes, but I don't think we're going to get too stroppy if you overrun, and certainly not if you underrun.
Trying to start time. Yes, so yeah, if you understand, that's the presentation ready. So when you're ready to start, you should go to us. Brilliant. Thank you.
Chairman, could we just help people manage the microphones, because I think that's important.
Absolutely. I always forget this. Press the button in the middle. When the green light is on, that means that the microphone's working.
Yeah.
Typically, everybody in here can hear what you say, whether you use it or you don't. but people sitting at the back can't because the acoustics work in here, but they don't work over there. So whenever you're speaking, if you can make sure the green light's on, that's good.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. I'm Helen Metcalfe. I'm a neighbourhood planning consultant, and I've been helping Dordon Parish Council since December 2019 progress their neighbourhood plan. And I'm here in the context of an element, a very important element, is the work we've done around the community's aspirations for what was originally called H7, but is now called H4, because the local plan altered when sites came out through the process, so around H4. So I suppose just to put it into context, H4, the site we're talking about tonight, is an important part of the work I've done with the Parish Council and the work the Parish Council have done with their community, but it's certainly not the only work. So it's a part of it. So I think that context is quite important. I've prepared just a few slides, and there's just a sort of hooks in there, and then I really wanted to just sort of talk through some of the key principles in relation to those slides. So thank you, Mike. Okay, so I think the thing we wanted to impress really in terms of the process of how we got to the master plan. It is an indicative framework. We want to emphasise that. And how have we got to that point? Well, it was based on key criteria. And this key criteria has developed right from really my first meeting, which was really an interview in December 2019 with the group. We talked about, well, what's the issues? My first question when I engage with the community is, well, why have you got me in? What's bothering you? And then we spend a lot of time drilling down what are land use matters and what aren't. So the key criteria that I've got on there, if you, Mike, sorry, I've done it as animators at one time, thank you. So there's been a lot of consultation and engagement with the local community in relation to these sort of the principles. And these key criteria relates to H4, but they actually relate to all developments within the neighbourhood plan area. The consultation was originally workshops in January 2020, but we all know what happened in March 2020. So we had to quickly rethink how we engaged with the community. And I have to say that people like Byron have been fantastic. Byron is chair of the Parish Council. Is that right, Byron? Thank you. Byron's been great with Facebook. So although we've had a lot of lockdown difficulties, the community have remained really engaged. So in May 2020, I did a scoping paper where that was my summation of, well, this might be the vision, these might be your objectives. We see the key criteria, when you look back, were there from that point, really. And we were able to then get that information out to the community. There's been a considerable local knowledge of the site that's also fed into our very lengthy discussions. And I have to say that I'm continually humbled in my role in this process. I'm very much aware that the hours that I spend with these groups, I am the only one in the room being paid. You know, this is people's own time done in good faith. I personally make sure there's no, as far as I'm aware, there's no agendas. This is about, can we get the best plan for your community? Everyone understanding the constraints, the difficulties, the challenges. I ended up working with 8 neighbourhood plan group members, and these are a mixture of parish councillors and, importantly, residents who aren't necessarily on the parish council. So again, you're getting a different mix of people. And I actually calculated that between them, there was 122 years of resident experience for Dordon Parish, just by adding up how long they'd all lived in the parish. So in that regard, there's a lot of local knowledge going back a very long time in terms of what was there before and that sort of thing. And that definitely played on the minds of the group in terms of, you know, well, what is reasonable, and this is everyone was very aware that this is a difficult site. You know, there were because of groundwork conditions. Everyone, you know, no one is under any illusion about those sort of challenges. Mike, next slide, please. Also, of course, we were working very cognizant of the evolving local plan. I mean, at the start of the process, it was not yet adopted, but it was very much going through the examination process. And in fact, one of the things that informed the master plan was a matters arising discussion with the examiner, where North Warwickshire set out what they considered the site footprint for all the different elements of H4. So we've got the extent of the whole site, and then we talk about the local wildlife sites, and we've got their measurements here. And I'll pick that up later on, but when I say the requirements, the community, in terms of what was in the public domain, the group were very much understanding and looking at the evidence base that was being presented through the local plan process for the site. Mike, next bit, please. Thank you. And then, of course, ultimately, what became now the adopted local plan policy for North Warwickshire. And the group were very clear, I was very clear with the group, that this is non-strategic in the sense that there is no suggestion or attempt to scupper whatever North Warwickshire's strategic policy is. Neighbourhood planning doesn't do more than, it's local, it's non-strategic policies. It's putting the flesh on the skeleton of a district policy for those elements within Dordon plan area. So in that respect, we're doing it. And the NPPF, of course, the National Planning Policy Framework, the regulations that the government set centrally, talks a lot about neighbourhood planning being a powerful set of tools, about it allowing the community to create a shared vision, but also about it being very clear about that this is about the non-strategic things. So we were looking at that. And I think there's one more bullet point, is the mic on this slide. Something else that came out in July 2020, so when we were all hunkered down and locked down in COVID, but Building for a Healthy Life was a document that the group really resonated with the group. And it's written in partnership with Homes England, NHS England and the NHS Improvement Partners. But it was actually building on Building for Life 12, which again was the industry standard document. So Homes England is the National Housing Accelerator, and the Building for a Healthy Life is the Homes England's key measure, design quality. That's what it says on the document. But in terms of the key criteria was always underpinned by local plan policy, NPPF, and Building for a Healthy Life. So that's the sort of the technical substance to what we were proposing. There was one other thing in terms of where the group were coming from and their approach, and it was really it's actually a paragraph in the local plan, in the adopted local plan. It's paragraph 2.15. And North Warwickshire, accept that due to the rural nature of the borough, making quality places that are integrated into the existing fabric of settlements wherever possible will be important. Making settlements work will be just as important as delivering a specific site, as this will lead to their long-lasting success. And of course, for the Dordon residents, long-lasting success is really what they're interested in. So, that paragraph in the North Warwickshire local plan is really what the Dordon Neighbourhood Plan Group, through their master planning work, have tried to interpret for their plan area. Next slide, please. Okay, so what's the key criteria? So first one, please, Mike, is a bullet point. Integrated neighbourhoods. Now, we do have some key criteria. I'm going to read a little bit out. Dots, you've got them, haven't you? I don't know if members of...
No, they haven't had them.
Right, okay, but I'm certainly happy for it to be circulated afterwards. But just to make the slides not too wordy, these are the headings, but under it, there's just a few things that I just wanted to draw your attention to. So, under the integrated neighbourhoods, the justification for this is that major development on this site must not become a separate settlement from Dordon. If possible, there should be a safe, direct access to a local centre from Long Street, ideally through the southern part of Long Street Recreation. Access from Long Street will be limited. There was an aspiration for public transport, but that may be just not deliverable. But certainly a cycling and walking, an active route through, was something that has been talked about right from the start. But there's an acknowledgement that this requires work with different landowners, and the parish council are seeking to work with North Warwickshire to see if this can be achieved. So that's something that's one element of integration. But integration also means how the site sits in relation to the landscape and the existing built form. The land east of Dordie is undulating, and the neighbourhood plan working group have identified key views from within the area, from within the site, and also from Dordon looking across the site. And what they've asked for really, or tried to work on, is, well, how might we project some of these key views through, again, to knit the landscapes together, so and have a visual connection. So that's something else that's part of the integration aspect of it. And there's a hope really that the layout of development within the site should respect these view corridors where possible and provide glimpses through to the existing green spaces like Hollies Wood. So if you stand on Lord Street Recreation Ground now, you can see Hollies Wood. So it's whether, things like that could be accommodated within development. So that's the first one. Walking and cycling is the next one. So if integration is the main criteria, a major development is designed with this in mind, then existing and new residents will be able to move easily between the new community and the existing Dordon built-up area. Given the health inequalities in Dordon, and the neighbourhood plan has produced evidence around that, which has been very helpful. The dominance of the car and travel into around Dordon and the evidence of poor air quality, obviously because of things like the A5, the traffic volumes. The group feels a real opportunity here to get people out of their cars, walking and cycling across the site and from the existing settlements, particularly, as I say, from Dordon, if we can get a cut through. So the layout should ensure access for all and help make walking feel like an instinctive choice for everyone undertaking short journeys. Street space should be shared fairly between pedestrians, cyclists and motor vehicles. I mean, this is all just good design, really. Primary school is proposed in the context of the North Warwickshire policy. So there's a hope that the location of the school and the access to it should encourage walking and cycling rather than school runs in the car. And then healthy, really just a reference to healthy streets improve people's physical and mental health, encouraging walking and cycling, outdoor play in streets where it's safer for younger children to cycle to school can create opportunities for social interaction and street life, bringing wider social benefits. So, I mean, I think we all know the importance of walking and cycling, but how can we encourage that and promote that? How to create an opportunity was something that was important. Homes for everyone. So the group are very aware that the local plan is as much the challenge has been about actually meeting the needs of neighbouring authorities as well as the local authorities' needs, and that's accepted. It's accepted that many of the future residents of the land east of Dordon will not be local. That's fine. However, the growth of this scale, such a large scale proposal on the edge of Dordon, should seek to also address local housing need. I don't think that seemed to be unreasonable. And the group were able to commission through the neighbourhood plan process and technical support from AECOM. So AECOM did the master planning work for the group. They also did a housing needs assessment for the group. So that's not so relevant to the design that we're talking about tonight, but it was part of the key criteria. I just think it's important that everyone understands in the round the issues that the group were looking to address. The next one, please. Protect and enhance the site's biodiversity. I said I'd mention exactly the reference to the matters arising, because this was relevant to exactly the site footprint of the local wildlife sites. So it was PSN 901 in an exchange with the examiner. And we got from that the site area for the Hollies local wildlife site in the ancient woodland was 7.5 hectares. The old orchard woodlands was 13.82. The orchard tip spoil heap was 5.98. And then in the matters arising, there was a discussion about an option 1 and an option 2, and that really related to how much other space might there be. So the open space around Who Hill and the obelisk in option 1 was 5 hectares. That included a buffer zone around some of the historic assets. And then there was an option 2 that was 10 hectares. So again, the principles upon which it was based was stuff that was in the public domain, and it was information that we got from North Warwickshire. So that gave developable areas. And this was the information we gave to AECOM. along with the key criteria and numerous discussions and site visits, for which they then came away and gave them a number of options for the master plan framework. The other thing to say about I've talked about the importance of protecting the local wildlife sites, and I'm sure nobody in the room will disagree with that. But the group did also recognise that it's a highly valued landscape with footpaths, informal and public rights of way that intersect it. And the area has provided a green lung really for Dordon residents for many years. And I think, again, it's trying to make sure that the existing green spaces and the network of existing routes, they create a strong landscape. So it's actually about to use that as a basis for habitat creation throughout the development. And I think the most important sort of thing to say really about this whole thing about site biodiversity is just use the existing landscape. Don't impose a landscape scheme at the end, but build on the existing networks of footpaths and country lanes that connect the protected green spaces. So build on what's there. And again, that's best practice. And as I say, all these things I'm referencing, which will circulate, are supported by, and I quote, Building Healthy Life, NPPF, local plan policy. Low carbon and well-designed development. So when North Warwickshire declared a climate emergency, it was noted, and I've just got this off your website, that North Warwickshire Borough Council is ranked as the joint lowest performing council in the West Midlands for the measures it has to tackle climate change. So we thought that given the scale of development proposed in Dordon, then this is an opportunity to meet some higher standards. So that's not necessarily seen, especially in the master plan layout, but it might be in terms of how you deal with water and sustainable drainage and things like that. So again, in terms of the construction and things, it's about just looking to actually do a bit more, be a bit more ambitious in terms of low carbon, well-designed development. And then last one, please, protecting heritage assets. So heritage assets are located prominently in and around the site. I think we all know where they are, and I don't think anyone would disagree about the importance of protecting them. But again, below the statutory designations, it was just, again, the community and the group come back to things like the Coffin Trail, which is the public right of way that runs across it, and I don't think anyone, again, it's a north-south route. It has a long local history and heritage, and then there's the lanes around St Helena, Dordon Hall Lane, Duzane. And again, these are country lanes, you know, and where possible, I think the group and the community just want demonstration that there's an understanding of these historic routes within the proposed development. Okay, I think next slide, please. So a bit of text here, sorry guys, everyone can read that. So the full report for the indicative framework master plan, there's a link there. If you Google Dordon Neighbourhood Plan, you get a website which has evidence base on it for the neighbourhood plan. And the quote, the context and the quote, the long quote is from AECOM. So there's a design code under master plan, and it's just really making it clear the design studies are high level and illustrative, prepared to demonstrate how the design principles that the parish council wishes to promote could be applied on the site. We have not undertaken technical studies on topics such as ground conditions, traffic and drainage, although AECOM specialists have inputted into design development. It is expected that full co-design exercises are undertaken by applicants on the site, which of course I'm aware, and that's great, that's happening. This report is just a step in that direction, enabling stakeholders to progress from an informed position. Okay, so that was always the context within which this work was done. So final slide, please, Mike. So obviously, a bit hard to see over there, but this is the indicative framework master plan. As I say, it is on the website with a link so you can actually spend time and look at it a bit more closely. I don't know if you want me to explain a little bit of the colours. The very dark green in the middle is the ancient woodland, and it's hard without a pointer, but I don't know.
Believe me, Jeff Brown normally has a pointer and it's still hard.
Yes. Yes, thank you. And then the sort of the green, sorry, Mike, the greens at the bottom. Yes, thank you. And there's a yes, thank you. So that's things like the orchard tip and the whatever else it's called, the orchard, the woodland, the old orchard woodland, and the orchard tip spoil heap. So I guess what we're trying to demonstrate is that we've got in there the constraints that we were aware of through the local plan reserve matters. If you look at the full document that ACON did, there is also a map showing constraints, and that's actually really informative. And that was shared, and this was shared with the developers in February 21. And again, so it hasn't changed really from February 21, the idea of what the group are looking to see. The Coffin Trail is on that, although I appreciate from the distance it's hard. Yes, the north-south, thank you very much. We've got a school indicated. Yeah, but again, I mean, I think, the group are not precious about this. There was a recognition that we wanted this to seek to achieve something reasonable. The development footprint, the developable area, again, I think we've provided that in the past based on this map. And it's just about in accordance with the matters arising numbers. I think the only thing that I'm aware of that is different from what I think you're going to hear next is possibly where the local centre might be. Now, the community's preference is for it to be, I'm sorry, Mike, one more point, that little peachy square. Thank you. Now, obviously, it's there because for the Dordon community, it's important. That's part of the integration. That's right next to Long Street, and it's important to integrate the settlements, and that was a part of that. And so my understanding, by and large, is the biggest difference is where that might be located. I don't know how, is there anything you want to say, Steve?
Literally, what I wanted to say is that we've tried to put forward to everybody somewhere that we already live in and love. We want to keep it that way. This is an area we want to develop if it has to be developed, which going forward it does, but we've got to live there at the end of it. And we don't want it to become an exclusive area or an area where people don't want to live. We want to look after places that are technically in Polesworth, but one side of the hedge is in Polesworth, Hoo Hill. Well, I love Hoo Hill just as much as I love Holly's Wood. I don't want to see either be damaged, and I want to protect both. I also acknowledge that we've got to have houses. And this is the framework that we as a group put forward as a talking point, as an opening point to people of how it could look. Not how it necessarily will look, but how it could look and how we could move forward together with it.
And it's probably worth adding that, and I don't speak for Polesworth, but you've seen it, the key criteria, I think it goes back to that really, the key criteria are the things that matter to the communities. If it can be interpreted another way, that's fine, but that key criteria.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you want to, should we sorry, we have a correction.
The actual, there's one, the school and health facilities, I mean, yes, they've been placed because, they've got to be placed somewhere. And we thought they were good places for them. But like everything, some pieces on the board can be moved because we don't know what the ground's going to be like, etc. But other places like Holly's Wood, Hoo Hill, the nature reserves and the heritage assets can't be moved. And that's why, there's some parts of that are set that we can't move. Yeah. None of us can move. Yeah. And other parts, we're looking for the best possible options. Yeah. We wanted a centre, in effect, for Dordon, because if there's going to be 2,000 houses, literally at the moment, Dordon's got 9 shops with about 20 parking spaces outside those shops. 2,000 houses, 4,000 people, it's not going to cut it, is it? We've got to have some sort of centre that is accessible to everyone. We want the communities of Polesworth, Dordon, and the new community. We don't want H4 to be a place where people say, well, I don't live in Polesworth, I don't live in Dordon, I live in that estate. it's got to be integrated as a place that we all live in together. And that was the general feeling of everyone that we spoke to and our group. I'd like to thank Polesworth. We've shown them this, as we've shown the developers for some time. I understand that they're supportive, and I'll leave it to them. Polesworth, yeah.
Can't speak for the developer.
No, I can't say that. But Polesworth appear to be supportive, and I'll leave it to them to put their own things forward.
You're happy for me to end the share?
Pardon?
Happy to be for to end the sharing screen.
Yes, please. I think maybe just for clarity for the recording, yes, the pink bit it was indicated as the health facility and the blue as the education. We misspoke. So that's just for clarity for the recording.
Oh, thank you very much indeed. Members of the board, do you have any questions?
Not at the moment.
I think you indicated, sorry, I don't know who your name.
Yeah, Paul Burns over on the Polesworth Parish Council side. So we definitely support and are definitely aligned on the key criteria and everything that's been said so far. But when we started to survey the residents as part of the early process of the neighbourhood plan, we can't see the clarity necessarily or the real detail on the impact of traffic in the area. So another, what did we say, 3,400 additional children potentially into the area, 2,400 new resident cars, the traffic coming into the existing high school at Polesworth, down Fairfield Hill into the village centre, into the crossroads. Instead of the moment, the traffic coming over the bridges from the lanes we spoke about there, the ones we all care about. We're looking for that clarity really in terms of what will there be for traffic, what will there be, what provision will there be for health, wellness, and leisure, and that's something that although the plan at the moment is there for discussion, it doesn't answer those kind of questions. It takes existing roads, it puts one new road in, puts a provision for some more shops, doesn't really answer the question on the high school or how that works in reality, because we live there today, as we all know. We know what happens at 9 o'clock in the morning on the school run, we know what happens at 3 o'clock. What we don't know is how does that get better as this plan starts to develop and come into fruition.
Yes, good evening. I'm Councillor Roy Skidmore. I represent Polesworth Parish Council. I was elected by the residents of Wharton to serve on the Parish Council. I think we ought to mention the fact is that we are a little bit behind Dordon, well, quite a bit behind Dordon with their plan. However, we do support what we've seen as what they put forward for the H4 site, and we will follow in the same vein and follow on from that. We can't turn around and say, right, we're not going to continue the cycle path down because you've got that far, obviously. So we will, support them in that instance. We've done quite a bit of work on our green spaces. We've had an initial engagement with the community. And I think what you've got to think about as well is that we've got 3 villages coming onto Polesworth. There's Birchmoor, Polesworth and Wharton. So it means we have to do community response from each of those 3 villages, which we partly through it. We've got a person on our committee that's working on the heritage of the whole of the 3 villages. And we've agreed to have some workshops, come in contact with Dordon, working on the basis of the H4 plan, so that we can come to some mutual agreement as to where we're going. However, our Polesworth suffers very much from the lack of health resources. We've got in Wharton, we have a lot of elderly people, and they have to travel a long way to go up to the Dordon surgery to get, medical attention. However, that's by the way, and that's to be taken into consideration with our plan. But that's how we are at present. We're working very hard on it. We're driven obviously by our consultants. So they educate us in many respects because we're not all expert planners, and they're sort of giving us our instructions and we're just supplying them with the information as and when they want it. So that's the position at present of Polesworth.
Thank you. Members, any questions for colleagues from Polesworth?
If you don't mind. So, Paul, you were talking about the high school.
Yeah.
You were talking about the road infrastructure and the issues about. So, in the local plan, obviously there is a primary school that's already been set in the master plan for the area. The high school is also in there for funding. There is no secondary school in the plan. That was clear. Everybody knows that. So there won't be a new one either. The funding will be provided, and obviously we have to provide education to all the new housing. That's not, obviously we can't not do that. Going to the point of the road infrastructure, Dordon and Polesworth have always been a problem. It's one road. We live on the A5, don't we? Unfortunately, that's the way we're set up. Obviously, the developers are here to talk about different things, and obviously there is already infrastructure that we're trying to talk about. What my interest is, though, is that I've heard a road from the recreational ground in Dordon. Was that a path from Dordon?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask.
Yeah, it's an active route. I mean, there was a hope for some sort of public transport because there was lots of discussion about accessibility.
Yeah.
But I think, that's very much an aspiration.
Yeah.
But certainly a walking, cycling route that connects Long Street Recreation Ground into the site, I think. But I mean, we have discussed this before. I fully appreciate that that's outside the site allocation,
Right.
but it's not outside the imagination of everyone here to come together to find a way to deliver that.
No, that's brilliant. I was just in my head. I was trying to think that's going to be a hard thing to run
Yeah.
through there, but now it's a walkway. Okay,
Yeah.
it makes more sense.
Yeah.
Roy, on the medical thing you were saying about, I think it may be worth as councillors to talk to the Polesworth and Dordon surgery group. They do have a surgery in the middle of Polesworth, and we need to get them to open it more and actually provide a better service to the area.
Emma is the representative for the people on the,
For the people.
sorry.
I was just going to say that, yeah, I'm Councillor Emma Wapples, Vice Chair of Polesworth Parish Council. We've just had a reshuffle in our local parish council, and one of the jobs that I've been assigned to is to represent our parish for the patient group forum, and I believe the next one is the 31st of May. One of the points that we were going to look at was exactly this, really. We're all very aware, the elephant in the room is that we already have issues, and a lot of this is voiced publicly on social media with a lot of our residents. So, this is something that we really need to sort of, damp down really and find out some proper solutions going forward, because all they can see at the moment is we're already in difficulty, as with the traffic, as with, other issues regarding schooling. We know, as Dan said, that there's no plan for a high school, but I think we need to do a bit more scoping locally in the borough, because I believe that there are capacity issues with all of the local high schools and senior schools. So I don't think we can sort of think, well, we'll just put them to the next school, because I think there's a bigger, wider issue here. So perhaps some scoping exercise really would be my way forward to find out where we're going with numbers for schools. Because if we're not going to have a dedicated one, we need a firm answer for our residents to go back and say, we have got enough in the area.
John.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is just for information. I've had a long discussion with Dr. Brown at Dordon and Polesworth, who's one of the senior partners there. And he's told me NHS England has said there will not be another new surgery in Dordon or Polesworth.
We've got a perfectly adequate we've got a perfectly adequate health centre in Polesworth, which is it's underused. It's a beautiful building. There's receptionist there. There's surgeries there, but our elderly people have to travel all the way up to Dordon to get medical assistance, and the transport, the bus transport to do that is negligible. It's, it just isn't there. But, as I say, the centre in Polesworth it's a beautiful centre, which could be, fully used better.
I think that's certainly raised a number of issues that we'll all need to think through and work through. The one thing I'd say is this is absolutely the time to aspire to imagine what is possible and to try and work to that. If we don't at this stage in the process set out what we'd all ideally like, the one thing that certainly is we won't get it. I'm not going to say everything is possible, but if we don't raise the issues and don't think through them together, then we'll all miss out on it. So now is absolutely the time, as we move through this process, to get a clear understanding of what everyone would ideally like to see and see how we can best achieve as much of that as we possibly can. I mean, the one thing I was really excited about, I've been going on about it myself for ages, is protecting views. If we miss the opportunity now to protect the views, nobody's ever going to be able to help us to recreate those views. So there's a lot of good stuff here, I think, and a lot of great opportunity to build on. I genuinely commend all of you for what you're doing. This is, it's a thankless task, giving time and effort to try and develop this. And nobody will ever turn around and say you got it right, because we all get things wrong as well as we get things right. But you're doing it, you are contributing, and it makes such a big difference to local people having a valid say in the way this develops. So you're doing a great job, and please carry on, all of you carry on doing it.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It sounds an excellent plan. We have listened before. I think Polesworth is very much aligned, especially with the heritage and the aspirational aspects. The roads, I do have some concerns, but we'll have to see how that works out. The educational side of it, the primary one looks as if it's been addressed, but the sort of high school one, like Dan mentions, that's never been, as Dan said, quite rightly said, part of the plan. It's how that actually translates going forward and works when we've got the houses built. What I wouldn't like to see is for local people not to be able to use the local high school. I want to be able to see the people who live there on that development being able to have a choice, that they're confident they're going to get their children into the local high school and not have to get, cars, taxis or buses along either to Atherstone, the Neaton way, or over to Tamworth. So I think if we're determined to integrate the villages into that one sort of look, that educational aspiration is really key to it. I'd like to put that forward as a suggestion that we look, like Dan says, how the funding there, because there is funding there, translates into the actual places.
I'm not saying that we didn't consider about the educational, but we had to work within the local plan, and the local plan, we were told, didn't cater, as it stands at the moment, for secondary or further education. And so working within the local plan, that was why we put forward our neighbourhood plan as it is. So I may well sympathise with you, but that's why our plan didn't include it, because we're actively working within the local plan.
Okay. Yes, I'm Dorothy Barrett. I'm the floor planning manager here at the Borough Council. In the policy in the local plan, which is policy H4, number item 3 there is that we would seek a financial contribution to existing secondary school provision to ensure the satisfactory availability of school places in a locally accessible location. So it is in H4. At the time, the information that we were provided for by the county council was that the size of the development wasn't actually big enough to actually cater for a brand new secondary school, and so it would have to be some sort of financial contribution, and that's the reason why it isn't a brand new school, but it was a contribution to the existing provision, and that's the sort of thing that we would have to look at if, as and when a planning application progresses. Thank you.
Jackie?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think the work that's been done around this master plan, the way that it's been done is absolutely, stunning in the kind of quality of what's come through. And I guess my question really relates to how this framework that has been developed, and obviously Polesworth has increasingly through the neighbourhood plan has joined in that process, and more recently in terms of the principles, that shared piece of land for which the development is on a scale that this borough really hasn't seen before. I mean, we're now talking about a settlement, and if you include the 3 villages, if you like, of Polesworth as well, that's going to be bigger than Atherstone in its catchment, and the infrastructure issues that need to support that and where they should be is absolutely crucial. But I think the question for me in terms of the vision and the landscaping and the other sort of observance of those principles, and it may be that you're going to come on to this when we have the dialogue with the developers, is to what extent that dialogue and discussion about what's possible is going to be taken, how it's going to be taken forward, with whom, what process is going to be followed, and the extent to which this and the work that's gone on as part of that. And I have to compliment our borough council officers like Mike Dick and Dorothy that have surrounded a lot of the groundwork in framing this master plan and giving the evidence to support it. It's just, I'm not clear after we have this presentation and the discussion of it and key issues that have come out, what then the next steps are. And just picking up your point about the landscape, Chairman, when the local plan and the designated sites were being discussed, certain members went round in a coach and we saw the landscape that we're now talking about, that is H4. And it is certainly one of the most beautiful landscapes in my view, with the views and the walks and so on, that from the Long Street side, when you look across, it's very important that aesthetic and enjoyment and the green spaces and the connectivity that is described here for people to able to access that. For me, that's an absolutely non-negotiable bit, those linkages between, if you like, the old settlements and the new settlements, and the access through those pieces of land to enable everyone to enjoy what's there, and also the new facilities that would be coming on stream. That seems to me to be absolutely crucial. But what I'm not clear in terms of our role as a borough is how we are going to broker some of those deals and help negotiate some of those fixed points on behalf of both Polesworth and Dordon, so that from here on, as the planning applications come through, we keep holding that kind of vision and principles to account when those planning applications come through. I think the biggest fear, and I've heard it certainly said in the parish council, is that this master plan will only work if the planning applications that come through are not done in a kind of disjointed and fragmented way. There has to be some keeping of that vision and the coordination of those applications, so that things don't get missed out that absolutely are crucial to making this master plan a success and enabling that integration of the settlements and the advantages for local people to actually come about. Because, you know, if they all come through individually and incrementally, and there isn't that holding the master plan as the, you know, feet to the fire, if you like, then we will end up with quite a lot of different settlements that don't really work together, and the advantages potentially of all of this development will be lost, both for all communities concerned. So it's just really the process from here on. We may not want to discuss that today, but it just seemed to me that, you know, after the presentation, I'm sure colleagues here, having got to this point, will want to know what is the next step in terms of that dialogue, and what is the role of the Borough Council in brokering that dialogue with the developers and between the parties that have got involved so far.
I think all I can do at this stage, Councillor Chambers, is read out the bit of policy H4 that deals with it, where it says the framework and design guide to ensure the development for the whole site is delivered in a comprehensive and coordinated manner, including the setting, significance and enhancement of the designated and non-designated heritage assets. Also, I'm pretty sure you're going to hold to that. I know you well enough to know that that is not going to be forefront in everybody's mind as we go on, but it's not being forced into. That's positively, I think, what we all want to achieve. And we may not get it all absolutely right, but setting out what we're trying to get to and working together, I think we've got a better chance. So genuinely, I think perhaps what we do now is if we listen to the landowners and promoters presentation, and then we can come back to that and have another quick chat if we need to. So, landowners and promoters, over to you.
Should we do that?
Do you need to do an introduction again, Mr. President, or shall we continue on?
Yeah. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Board and parish councils and those in the public gallery. If we just introduce ourselves this evening, firstly, my name is Mark Stitch. I'm a planning director at Barton Moor, now Stantec, here on behalf of one of the three principal landowners in respect of the allocated sites, the Church Commissioners for England. And I was heavily involved in the promotion of the site and the local plan examination. So familiar to some of you here, but that's my role and continue to be involved in bringing forward the site.
Good evening, Michael Davis, Planning Director from Savills. I represent Cathedral Agricultural Partnership, and we have also, similar to Mark, been promoting the site through the local plan process and attended some of the meetings both with officers and with the parish council. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Catherine Bentham, and I'm also a Planning Director at Barton Moor, now Stantec. And I represent I Am Land. I Am Land weren't involved with this particular site during the local plan examination, but have come on board since and are working with the other two parties.
Great. First slide, please, Mike. So thank you for the opportunity to present to you this evening. This does follow a presentation we gave to Dordon and Polesworth Parish Councils very recently, the 12th of May. And you'll see how that fits in with our engagement strategy as we go through the presentation. Short series of slides, really starting with the adoption of the local plan and the recent adoption of that plan, and in particular, policy H4. It's not the only policy that we have to have regard to when we look at the site, but it's clearly the starting point, as is figure 1, and that identifies some of those assets that have been referred to both by Helen this evening and Dordon Parish Council, but also Benders and Polesworth Parish Council. So we shouldn't forget that the policy H4 sits alongside figure 1, but also the other policies within the plan, which does include LP1, which is around sustainability, does include LP35 around energy and climate change. We know allocated for a minimum of 2,000 dwellings into the local plan process. Clearly, that's not the only part of the allocation for this site. What is important is that it does require, the policy requires the Master Plan Framework and Design Code to be prepared before planning permission be granted. And the Chair this evening has helpfully explained that Master Plan Framework Design Guide relates to the whole site, and that's certainly our ambition, our intention is to prepare that with the Borough Council, but also through consultation with the parish councils and the wider community as we move forward. And that will set the context in which any future planning applications can then come forward. Clearly, that has to be a comprehensive and coordinated master plan framework and design guide. And one of the policy criteria, as been mentioned, is around local identities. And that was very important, a point that was made during the local plan examination. And we recognise that. That includes linkages both through and back into the site in terms of pedestrian cycle and yes, vehicular, but around pedestrian cycle access. Also, the policy talks very much around, as we mentioned, education, health, and clearly transport, starting with pedestrians, cyclists, public transport, and then the car. Those are matters which we have to deal with through the master plan framework, and also design guide. And really, the other piece is around the phased delivery of site-wide infrastructure. And we touched on some of that in terms of community infrastructure this evening, around the school provision, the primary school provision, around health and how that's best delivered. And clearly, that's through consultation with a lot of you in this room, and those that perhaps aren't in the room at the moment. Next slide, please. In terms of where we currently are, we did a lot of technical work at the time of the local plan process, the local plan examination. But also since then, we've carried on that technical work. Some of that's already been mentioned this evening, but Brookbanks have provided us a summary document, and that picks up some of the technical matters information we have, and also further surveys we have to carry out. And in particular, looks at noise and air quality, flood risk and drainage, services infrastructure, ground conditions and mining, and also the topography of the site. Those matters, along with a number of other environmental components, will form part of the technical documentation that will inform that master plan framework document design guide. It's very important we have that evidence base as we move forward, and we will share that through again through a series of workshops as we move forward on the master plan. A series of ecology surveys again since 2019. They've been carried out 2020, 2021, standing COVID, and also they're continuing this year through 2022. That survey work will move forward, and a key piece of that is around ground investigations in terms of site conditions, both in terms of where the land use is going and also the road. Fine. Thank you. Importantly, and a key piece and recognition to the Borough Council in terms of securing DA5 funding confirmed. We know there is more to come, there is more to be done, so hence the reference there to the RIS3 application being submitted. And in terms of that timetable, we've obviously sought to get the latest timetable. We understand that there is a meeting this week with National Highways, formerly Highways England, and Department of Transport, looking at the programme and timetable. We understand that will be updated following the meeting we have this week. And clearly, if we have any feedback, sure as some of you might do, we'll obviously share that with the board and others, and the parish councils in particular. I'll pass over to Michael to just pick up where we are in terms of the draft neighbourhood plan and other matters before passing over to Catherine. Michael.
Thank you, Mark. Well, just following on from the presentation that Helen Metcalf has helpfully provided this evening, what I'd like to sort of put on the record is very often on these complex projects, we're presented with lots of things that communities don't want and don't like, and there's a resistance. But here, what is really, really encouraging to us as advisors to our clients is that the community have clearly gone away and had a proper think. They've taken on proper advice, and the technical work that's been provided by AECOM, I think, has helped that. So what we are faced with here is a very passionate community, led with the professional advice from Helen, that we feel is a really good starting point. So, I think it's fair to say that we are generally in support of what's been prepared. You're never sure when you're presented with these things cold, whether it's going to be all matters that you can accept or all matters that you can't. So I think a huge, offer of support and confidence from us that we're dealing with a community, and obviously with Polesworth coming on board too, that we can do this thing jointly. This is not about us running away, doing our plan, presenting something to the communities and saying, there you go, Polesworth, there you go, Dordon, that's what we're doing. So that isn't and never has been our intention. And clearly from the plan policy, the way it's written, we have to do that. So in terms of further work, I think I picked up on what Helen was saying before, that further technical work, it is accepted, is needed. And that's what Mark has just helpfully referred to. Now, I think in terms of what we're all aware of, there's lots of aspects relating to the site that are removable. And I think we would agree with you that things like the hollies, the local wildlife sites, they're all areas that we wish to enhance, protect, preserve, and make sure that future residents don't come in and trample over them and put pressure on the means that we're not using the existing community. So we're alongside you on that. In terms of what our future objective is, it's to provide places for people to live, work and play in an enjoyable manner, but that's got to be in harmony with the existing communities. That can't be bringing new people in and doing it to the communities. It's got to be something that's got to be accepted by both existing Polesworth and Dordon residents. It's not also, I think we've had quite a few concerns about infrastructure. Rest assured, we have those concerns too, in the sense that we don't wish to provide homes on a site that can't be accessing school facilities or local shops and services and medical facilities, because that doesn't sell houses either. So, that's hugely important to future house builders. So part of the master planning work that Bolton Wilmore, Stantec and Savills have been undertaking to date is to make sure that it's a place that's well planned for. I think Mark has already referred to phasing. An example I can give you is probably when you're trying to widen a motorway. Initially, you need to trim the lanes down and slow the traffic down, and then eventually, when that work is done, it widens, then everybody flows a bit better. So there will be some pinch points. I think it's undoubted that in the early phases, pressures do get put on existing services. But what we'd like to assure you is that we don't wish to leave a footprint that our clients find difficult to sell in terms of houses and the community. There's a legacy here, and I'll come back to that shortly. So in terms of the design guidance and design code, there's a lot of good work that's been done. And I think what we would like to do is assure, certainly the work that Dordon have done, but I think Polesworth are sounding like they're coming on with that as well, is that this is for discussion. This is not, we don't like it or we're not going to work with it. This is all for discussion moving forward. So we're happy to take that forward. Some of the other things that have changed, I think, significantly since the plan was adopted, Biodiversity Net Gain is now come into the Environmental Act, and therefore on that basis we've got to make sure that we can deliver an increase on site. So that might have an impact on what we're doing, but we'd have to take that on board. Mike, can we just move to the next slide, please? I think we're ready to talk about future engagement. As I just highlighted, I mean, the approach we take on all projects, but I think what I'm infused with here is we have a group of people in both communities that wish to play an active role. And I think that active role seems to be messaging I'm hearing is that we want to make the best place we can of it. And this is not about resistance and building walls. This is about building bridges. So that for us is an easier project to walk into and work with people, and where communities are saying, no, we've got walls and we don't wish to have any more. So there will be, I suppose, a list of essentials, and they are already contained in the policy. And then, of course, there'll be desirables. And I think what Mr. Simpson, the chair, was saying earlier on is that you need to put those things down and you need to set out what it is you want. And I think that's where we can certainly work with the communities in understanding what they are. And of course, one of the things that we'll be working on, certainly at the moment, is ground conditions. Cut and fill is another exercise. The costings of all of those things to us at the moment are complete unknowns. So obviously viability and all kind of phasing and everything else that comes through is all part of that comprehensivity. So
television going on. Come here, quick to the next one.
It just goes to show that's good.
Mike, do you just go back? Thank you. Brilliant. So in terms of the approach we're seeking to take, as I say, it's to work with the information and master plan framework that Dordon have commenced. It's to work with Polesworth, and I think Mark's already touched upon a recent meeting that's taken place. That was a fairly positive meeting. One of the things I think that shouldn't be underestimated is having officers like Dorothy and Mike, where there's the longevity there. They've been through the plan, been here many years, and at the moment working with various councils around the region. One of the things we don't always have is continuity. So huge endorsement to the officers we're working with, and I think that goes with the contacts we've had as well with Polesworth and Dordon. County Council, there's clearly a massive role for the County Council Highways team to play here. We've had a recent workshop with them, but of course there's a lot more work to do in terms of how the A5 and the dualling of that is going to be phased through. Education as well, we shouldn't underestimate the need to work more with the education team. We've already started those initial discussions. One of the things I've just picked up this evening is obviously the issue of the surgery, and I think it would be really, really important moving forward that we as the advisors to the landowners and promoters, but also working alongside the parish councils, and we actually understand together what those issues are and how we can address them. Because again, the last thing we want to be doing is introducing new residents that can't get the doctor's appointment for 3 or 4 weeks because there isn't capacity. We wish to understand that too and work out and establish how we resolve that going forward. So, rest assured, and I hope we've given you certainly from an engagement and workshop point of view and work that's been done to date, certainly confidence from our point of view that everything that you're doing is in line with the kind of things that we would normally look at. And I think working together going forward is certainly the key message that we would like to give out. Thank you. Ms. Catherine.
Thanks, Michael. Oh, we really jumped on. Thanks, Mike. Yes, I mean, as has already been said, really, that the key is that the work that we do moving forward is joint, and it involves the parish councils, involves Dot and Mike as well, and then does involve all the stakeholders and the local community. And I'll come on to sort of show you the draft master plan shortly. But that sort of joint working has already started. As we said, we had the meeting the other week. And then during lockdown, for example, we had a meeting with Helen and the neighbourhood plan group, again, just to talk about their emerging proposals at that time and just to sort of put our views forward really then as to what was coming forward. So I would say the sort of joint working has started, and from our perspective, it really is key that it continues. So in terms of the master plan that I'll come on to show you, as everybody has said so far, it really is, it's subject to quite a lot of further technical work, environmental work and design development that's required to really evolve that document. Ground conditions being key, and that's one of the first bits of sort of big work that's being commissioned. We also need to look at the design side very carefully. We need to understand fully the context of particularly Polesworth and Dordon and what makes those two villages distinct and special, and make sure that those characteristics are reflected in the development. So there's quite a lot of design sort of background work that the master planners have to undertake just to sort of understand the two settlements and understand how that will be reflected in the master plan. As you'll see, I mean, you saw from the neighbourhood plans group master plan, but there is a lot of green space on this site naturally anyway. So without even trying too hard, it naturally becomes a very landscape-led development, and it's really just making sure that all those green spaces connect up and they're not just disparate areas of green space. And as Michael has just said, we've got biodiversity net gain, which has come in now as well, which is also something that needs to be factored into the proposals. And then finally, the government quite rightly having a very, very big push on high quality design, really making sure that developers step up to the plate in terms of the quality of the design, not only in terms of its appearance, but also in terms of the climate change agenda and ensuring that that these houses, that well, not just the houses, but the developments as a whole really step up to the plate in terms of sort of future proofing for climate change. And definitely, Helen mentioned it, but connecting basically existing and new communities so that the two are well integrated, and ensuring that, you know, not only do the new residents connect into the existing villages, but obviously that the existing villages obviously connect into the new development as well. And finally, again, building on what Helen said, really focusing on health and well-being and ensuring that people can move easily around the sites, you know, walking, cycling, connectivity, really, really important. Mike, can you just move on to the next one, please? So that is, as I said, it's our sort of first draft master plan, really. And building on what Helen has said, the main area of sort of difference between the two is probably the location of the local centre. But I think for both parties, it's not fixed at the moment. And I would say that for a scheme of 2,000 new homes, when we've got a school and other community facilities, if the starting point of the difference between this is the location of the local centre, I think that's a pretty good position to be in as a starting point, really. And it does just show that actually that there is a lot of commonality between the two master plans. Again, I'll try and sort of talk you through it, but the green infrastructure areas are self-evident. Most of them are already in place. So we work with those. We've got the ancient woodland, the wildlife sites, and then the big red line that sort of runs north to south, sort of curving towards the eastern side. That's the proposed new road for the site. Again, probably only can go in one location, to be honest. And then the pink that we've got is the potential location for the primary school, and the sort of red colour rectangle that's sort of to the east of that. That's looking at where we've potentially at the moment got the location of the local centre, just to have some joint uses really between the primary school and the local centre, so that people can make link trips. So, you know, people are there dropping children off at school, then at the same time they go into the local centre. So that's sort of our thought behind it, but it really is it's a starter for 10 in terms of how we think the site could work, and it really is a sort of point for discussion between everybody that's involved. But I think that the really key point is that the starting point for both sets of master plans at the moment is that there is more commonality than there is difference, which is a really good starting point. So thanks, Mike. Can you just move on? So just finally from our side, just looking at the programme, and again, like everything, this is subject obviously to the technical work and what that shows. But we've started our technical work. The key bits being ecology surveys, which obviously is seasonally constrained, and the ground investigations, because for this particular site, it's a very big driver. There are a series of meetings already which are in the diaries, working with the developers, working with Dot and Mike and their team, and then we have the county council who will be involved in some of them, and National Highways as well in relation to the A5. We've said to the both parish councils when we met them a couple of weeks ago that we will be putting a series of meetings in the diary to liaise with both the parish councils to move the scheme forward. And as part of that, there will obviously be wider community involvement as well. And at some point, we'll obviously do a bigger community stakeholder engagement event. And then really over the rest of this year and into next year, we'll be looking at evolving the master plan framework and the design guide. As Mark and Michael have already said, that needs to be in place at the time of planning applications come in. So we'll be moving that forward through a series of design workshops with different stakeholders. And then the sort of overall timescale really is that what we're currently targeting is submission of applications, potentially spring, summer next year. But as I said, that is subject to the work that needs to be undertaken, and obviously the moving the master plan framework and design going forward. So that's everything from our side. It's a presentation which both the parish councils have seen before. We wanted to make sure that they have first sight of it. But we're now here to answer any questions that anybody might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, any questions? Councillor Hayfield?
Colin Hayfield, I'm just a different area in the borough on Castle Sound, and this is all quite instructive to me, really. I've got 2 or 3 points and then a question, please. I'm used to practicing planning applications. We get builds, people come up, want to go on, and I want to build 200 houses or something. Find a field of Philip houses. This is much bigger stuff, and I'm really impressed by this master planning that's going on, both at the community level and at your level. And it does sound, although it could really work. I guess my question comes to the practicalities of the build. Yes, you want to build houses people want to buy. So you've got to have facilities, you've got to have a community, you've got to have, what do they buy? They're not just buying 4 walls, they're buying more than that. And that. But it's the time scale of the build, and whether it's going to, presumably you're not going to just build 2,000 houses and then ready on for sale the next day, sort of up in one go. It's going to be phased. And I guess some of the experience I've seen in the past of some of these things is it falls apart at that point when there's different phases of build, as sometimes new owners take over and things like that. And it doesn't always glue together as well in the rollout as it does in this design and planning stage. What confidence can you give us that if you sign up to a master plan that we all agree with, the Borough Council signs up, that is what will actually happen over a period of, what, 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, whatever it's going to take to build 2,000 houses?
No, thank you for your question, and it's a fairly common query about how this is all going to come together. Well, I think the first thing here, which is an advantage we see compared to other schemes we work on, we across teams here are familiar with schemes of 2, 4, 6,000 dwellings. And very often the number of land ownerships is significantly more than what we've got here. Now the primary land ownerships here are in 3 core land ownerships. There are some smaller parcels, and generally what we do with that master planning is master plan them in, but then when we apply for planning permission, we let them do what they're going to do, which generally is in accordance with the master plan. But in terms of the phasing, the approach that we will take is to work with all parties. That's the parish council and the parish councils and the borough council, and there will be requests from all parties to do their thing first. So very often there'll be build as much of the road as you can, and then the education team will say, well, when can you build the school? So if you try to build everything in year 1, the scheme would become unviable. So you can't build everything in year 1, and therefore you have to work out when you can build. Then I think, as we've heard earlier on, the biggest issue for this site, unlike any other greenfield site, is its former use as an open cast mine. So we sat here now with all the knowledge we have, don't know, and we can't tell you what is underneath that ground. That's why that work's going to be done this year. We know that there'll be land stability issues around the site. We've just got to work out where they are. So that's the first thing. And there's cut and fill. What do we need to do to provide areas for the school, for example? You need a level site, you need a level playing field for sports pitches. You can't just stick it on the undulating land that's there. So there will be an exercise where you look at options for where uses can go. You cost those up and then say, right, sticking the school on a site like this is going to cost X million. If we find another part of the site which is maybe later in the phases, it's flatter and therefore there's a lesser cost than sticking it on a slope that needs to be cut and filled. So all of those things, we generally, Catherine said, the positioning of the local centre in the school is the challenge, because how that comes forward, you can't put a local centre in on day 1 because it's not viable, it doesn't have the critical mass of people. So you have to work out along the route, when do you put that local centre in? And if you put it on a part of the site where there isn't a road, then you have to work out, well, do we build the road to it? Or do we wait until a later phase? And at the moment, they're the kind of auctioneering pieces that we have to go through. But of course, what we're trying to say to you here and now is we will share those issues and report backs, if you like, on these technical issues with the parish councils, with the borough council, and talk them through and say, well, we could do that, but it's going to cost 3 times as much than if we do it another way. And that's how it will generally come forward. But the comprehensivity will be in the master plan we prepared jointly. And then from a legal point of view, all of the principal landowners will be signing up to an infrastructure package. And there'll be a headline section 106 where every party has to pay into that school, road, key infrastructure. And then each landowner will have its own site-specific issues to deal with. And that's how it kind of works. So this, from our perspective, we work on much more complex sites in terms of land ownership. So the fact that there's fewer landowners than what you get elsewhere is actually a helpful starting point. And I think, as I said before, sometimes you get local groups who turn up with a kind of a list of things they don't want, and therefore they don't want to work with anybody other than, you know, the local authority. So this is a really helpful starting point.
I guess, Councillor, the other part of that has got to be how we deal with the application ourselves, how the planning board deals with consideration of the issue. And, you know, we have in the past looked at specific subgroups or elements of the planning board. I mean, clearly, this sort of thing can only be dealt with by the council as a whole, because we have delegated power to an extent, but not entirely. But I do think the ability of the members who are looking at this, so they can see the vision, understand the vision at the beginning, and go through that whole process. And you know, a big chunk of that has got to come down to everybody in this room, really, but particularly the members on the board who've got to put their hands up at the end of the day for it or not, and to have real cognizance and a proper understanding of what policy H4 requires. And that to an extent is down to all of us, but particularly those who are going to be on that particular board. Jackie.
Yes, thank you for your presentation and for the master plan as it is at the moment. By the way, I'm Councillor Jackie Chambers. I'm the Borough Councillor for Dordon. I suppose when I look at the comparison between, if you like, the bottom-up community master plan from Dordon and the one that you've produced here, I worry a little about, in a sense, you're now going to take the lead, as I understand it, in taking this master plan forward, and others are going to react to what it is that you put forward. But when I contrast the number of informal footpaths and the connectivity that there is between, if you like, Old Dordon and H4 and what you've got, we've got arrows coming in from Polesworth, for example, but I can't see no lateral west-east, east-west linkages on the master plan that you've produced thus far. Now that may be that will evolve, and all these informal networks that are currently used and do provide that connectivity in terms of walking and recreational activities, that those will emerge. But I'm not clear. Obviously, land is precious; it costs, and every bit of land is potential for building on. And obviously, you have to work within your own views as to how you're going to make this sustainable from a financial point of view. So my first question really, in terms of particularly those lateral linkages that were talked about from Long Street across into this new development, where are they, and are they going to emerge, and what's the process of having that dialogue? Because, you know, I know parish councillors have actually walked many of these informal footpaths, and they do see it as absolutely crucial that those linkages, in terms of people being able to feel that that's all, that public space is all part of what they still have access to is very important. So not seeing those disappear is crucial. And I think in terms of the paper that we've got on the LDF, making sure that where possible, they should be reinforced and enhanced. So that's my first comment. My second comment in terms of the criteria that were drawn up, the key criteria for H4 by the parish council, which you've not spoken about very much, is homes for everyone. I mean, clearly local people feel that whatever is going to happen on H4, it's going to provide really very smart but unaffordable homes for the people whose, you know, children and so on have grown up in Dordon, but they will not be able to afford what's going to be built right next door. And I know we have policies in the local plan about affordable homes. We have a sort of, it's a 40% ambition around that. But I mean, at what point do we get into some real dialogue about the need for housing, the local people of Dordon and their generations, and indeed Polesworth, around how much affordable housing there is to be and what kind of homes for everyone, not just affordable, but people with disabilities, elderly people, and so on. And I'm not clear in terms of your thinking and that dialogue, how again that is going to be progressed in terms of that discussion.
I'll pick that up. Thank you. I'll pick that up, Councillor Chambers. We'll have first go. I think 2 points. We do start with policy H4 and figure 1, and that does show a number of those formal and informal routes, and that's very much the focus of the master plan framework evolution, if you like, and the conversations we're going to have not only with the Borough Council and the County Council's Highway Authority, but as we said, the 2 parish councils, and we've indicated that this evening and when we met them recently, that it is going to be key. And we do start with pedestrians, and we do then move to cyclists and then public transport and the car. I think the success will be the relationship between the existing and the new, and that integration. So we do see not only in terms of community facilities and access to the existing assets on the site being important, but obviously those existing routes where they are, where they exist principally formally, but obviously where they are informally as well. That's part of the assessment work that we'll carry out. So very mindful of that as we look towards the preparation of the next iteration, if you like, of the master plan framework. And we're not going to do that in isolation. Hopefully you'll be reassured by what we've said this evening in respect of that. In terms of homes for everyone, you're right. There's the affordable housing policy and vision around affordable housing. We know the Dordon neighbourhood plan group have prepared the housing survey, and again we've commented on that as part of our response to the neighbourhood plan, and we've said, confirmed to them, we'd welcome the opportunity to sit down and go through all our responses to the neighbourhood plan with them and Polesworth, so they understand our comments. And really that's something we will look at both with the parish councils, but also the determining authority being the Borough Council, in terms of housing mix and how that's brought forward as part of the master plan framework document, design guide, and ultimately the planning applications that come forward.
If I just say, I mean, this is not really a question for this board, more for the planning board and LDF together. But I'd like to see an iterative process over a series of meetings discussing specific topics, housing clearly one, highways another, and just go through each of the issues as we get to them. Clearly, every issue on its own is way too big to even more than scratch the surface here. But I do think opportunities for us all to properly understand the issues and the proposals and the solutions on a subject by subject basis would help us, because if we have one meeting to discuss all of it, then frankly we'll never get the detail that we need to do.
And certainly that was the intention, and we've talked around some of those topics with the borough, with the officers, Mike, Dorothy and Mike, and the county council have been present there around those items that we want to go through. And we have referred to workshops. It's not a workshop, it's workshops. And we've confirmed that both the Borough Council and the Parish Council. So that's our commitment in terms of moving forward. And I think it is going to be topic based. Can we get through, 2 topics, 3 topics in one workshop? Possibly, depending on the topic. But I think if we agree what those topics are, and we move forward collectively and in conversation, then that's clearly going to help build up that master plan framework as we see it.
Thank you, John.
Yeah. If the road from the A5 south to the site is not built first, now it's going to be done because they're not going up and down Long Street.
Okay, and I think that sort of, if you like, big 60,000 foot view is probably the one that we'd have to talk about first.
Yes, and also don't know about the environment. The biggest problem people with electric cars have at the moment is charging them. And from my scenes, I'm vice chairman of the PPG, and the biggest problem we have there is getting doctors.
Dan?
Just really total comments really about obviously seeing the parish councils, what they have done, and obviously the developers over there. I think that it is really good and quite heartwarming that we are reasonably close together in what we see the images for Polesworth and Dordon. And I think that this is the biggest thing. I think for the developers to understand, this is the biggest change in Polesworth and Dordon they will ever see. I've lived in Dordon all my life, and I represent Polesworth as a borough councillor, and it is the biggest change that we'll ever see. And to see that your plan actually matches somewhere towards what Dordon and Polesworth would like to see is great news. But it's also great for me to hear that Polesworth Parish Council are now working more closely with Dordon Parish Council to come up with a joint plan that will actually represent the whole area. I think from my point is, from a borough point of view, who's on also on the planning board, is that clear indication of the phases is really important. The residents need to know what's coming, when it's coming. So if I know that obviously we get the planning applications, but as John has rightly said, if you're not going to build the road first, that's going to cause more problems, and the residents need to know what problems they're going to face during the first bit. So I think if we're not clear, we're going to have a problem as we go through the stages.
Thank you. Don't know which way to go because I'm obviously done. But thank you for the presentation. Look forward to working with you in the future. I just want to make a comment really, and I know that people, particularly from the planning side, will probably jump on me now, but I'm going to say it anyway because I think this is the arena to do so. But my fear is that if we don't do a proper scoping, I know, please don't think I'm being a broken record here, but you must appreciate the issues that we have as residents, and that the residents come to us and talk about a lot are these big issues like, you know, the education. At the moment, the Polesworth School is oversubscribed. That's a fact. And obviously we have to wait for 106 money to come in bits and drabs. My issue is that point in the middle where we're waiting for those monies to come and become available. That issue is not only going to bottleneck, it's going to be a perfect storm really. And I think, you know, at this stage, albeit very early on, I think we really need to understand that we need to do some proper scoping with the local area, not just Polesworth School. Look at the doctors, what's already going on in the area, because obviously, you know, we've already got problems, and you probably hear this all the time from people that you're trying to work with, but you know, this is a real issue. We're going to have a lot of houses, and you know, it's not just 200 on a field. This is 2,000. This is massive. And because this delay in the monies that we see from a practical point of view, you know, I really can't stress enough that we need to start doing this scoping, the workshops, working with these people now, you know, before it gets to that point, and seeing if we can mitigate in any way, because it's an issue already. So that would be a really useful exercise to do, I think. Thank you.
Just to go up just slightly what John said, and to strengthen that, people in Dordon are really concerned that if the relief road is started from Polesworth, Long Street will gridlock, because 2,000 houses, by the time it reaches the A5, will have to go somewhere. They'll either go down the lanes or they'll go down Long Street. And Long Street can't cope now, so how it will cope with another 4,000 cars is almost impossible. So I know it's a planning matter for the likes of the Borough Council to decide, but people in Dordon have real concerns that if the more profitable part, I'm making that up, but if the more profitable estate is over towards Polesworth and building begins there, that everyone in Dordon and parts of Polesworth will sit in a permanent traffic jam. So we need some clarity for people that the building will start in a certain way that will not actually implode and gridlock the two communities. And that is a real big issue when you talk to people. I just wanted to say that.
Any other comments before we go back? So I'm cognizant of the time. I'm not trying to shut you all up, but I'd like to get all the questions in, then we'll get an answer.
There's just one question which I don't think has yet been picked up. It is about the relocation of the leisure centre, and the promise, if you like, that these communities will have a replacement and perhaps enhancement of the current leisure facilities that there are in both, serving both Polesworth and Dordon, which are now split up into two locations. So I don't think this appears anyway on either of the plans. So it's just a flag up that has to be it will come presumably in our discussion of the next item that's on the agenda about that obligation.
So a lot of big questions, and I guess most of it is going to be a question. We really need to see the timetable in a bit more detail so that we can understand how these things are going to work. And yeah, I'm sure members of the authorities as well as the community are genuinely concerned to see that. I should imagine you've got a fat lot of detail to it, but when will you know what you can tell us?
Yeah, I mean, just as a sort of starting point, I think the important thing to remember is that yes, it's 2020, and I do take point it is of a scale that this district hasn't ever come across before. I think it's also important to remember it's over a very long period of time. So this runs to the end of your current local plan period and beyond. So it's a very long development. So we won't have several hundred or several thousand new homes appearing overnight. It will be a long build. In terms of the phasing of it, the documents that we put in with the planning application will have to address phasing. We will have to look at, and we will have obviously discussed that beforehand, but we will have to look at how the site comes forward, where the development starts, the order in which the infrastructure will be built. And I think it's important to remember, if we take something like secondary education, just as an example, is that the way that it normally works, and I should say both ourselves and Dottermite, we've already had discussions with the County Council Education Department to talk about education requirements. But the way that it works is that any financial payments, again, they are paid in phases as well. So you would normally expect there will be a day one payment, a pre-commencement payment, and then it will be agreed as to how those remaining payments get made, and there will be certain trigger points. Normally it's in relation to number of units. The idea being that we don't end up with the problem that which does sometimes happen, but which has been described, which is that the education payments, for example, come along too late. And similarly, with regard to the doctor's surgery, we need to work with the CCG, with the NHS in that respect. But that is proving quite a difficult one, if I'm perfectly honest at the moment. I've got a number of sites where we have got land for doctor's surgeries, and as has already been said, they're not taking them up and building them. So that's a discussion that needs to be had, particularly if there's an existing site which is being underutilised at the moment, then it may well be that their preference is for us to fund for that to be improved rather than provision of a new surgery. But those are the discussions that we've really got to have. And I think the final question was programme. Sorry, the one on programme. It will begin to be fleshed out as we work through. But as I said, programme is partly related to the work that's ongoing, particularly in relation to the ground and what that shows really. But it will all be worked through. There'll probably be a lot of work that happens over the next year in conjunction with the parish councillors to sort of flesh out the detail really of the overall build programme, but also the sort of planning application side of it as well. So
Dorothy, what I think I'd like to see perhaps for the next meeting of the LDN is a broad schedule of the sort of subject matters that we can properly discuss and pencil in dates so that everyone has some idea of how we'll move forward and when we'll move forward. I think the context really has been in the developer's presentation in terms of the planning application will be in sometime in the spring, summer next year, or a series of planning. But I'd like to be able to give everyone a bit more comfort over the fact that there are a series of issues to talk through and how we will do that and which stakeholders will be involved in that. I think that would sort of, it's almost, I think we got a good conversation tonight. But there's an enormous amount more detail and more consideration to give to all of it. And starting to schedule that in a timetable, I think, would help me get my head around it a little bit more. So thank you very much, everyone. I think that was a good start, as they say. But it certainly is a marathon, not a sprint. And I hope we're all still friends at the end of it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. members of the LDF, if you, I think, perhaps 2 or 3 minutes to let people go up and stay for the rest of the meeting go, then we can carry on.
If you just approve whatever you're going to do, and then all go.
And then I'm going to get in
terms of the next item. The supplementary planning document, we've had a draft previously of the document, and what you have before you this evening today is a further draft of the supplementary planning document, and this has been updated with new information in terms of the background calculations. And also, one of the main changes is that the previous draft SPD that we were suggesting had 2 main areas at a high level. So it looked at Polesworth on one half and then Atherstone in another half. And any sites that were part of either of those 2 halves, the money was kept quite separate. But what the suggestion is now is that at the high strategic level, that it is one funding pot rather than, as I say, these previous 2 funding pots. The proposal is that it goes out for consultation for 6 weeks. The decision that you have on the board report, however, does need to be altered because it's actually the planning board that is the parent of the SPD process and not the executive board, which of course we're the subgroup of. We have suggested some minor changes to the wording to reflect that, and unfortunately I gave my copy to the chairman.
So members, I'll read it out to you. The recommendation now reads that the report of the May 22 consultation draft update on the planning applications for open space, sport and recreation and associated circular documents be noted, and any comments which members have on the documents are reported to the Planning and Development Board on the 6th of June. And then Planning and Development Board will in turn agree the issue for consultation. So it's your opportunity now to say whatever you like, try and incorporate those who will go to the planning board on the 6th of June. For those of you who are members of this board but not members of the planning board, take my genuine invitation to come and speak at the planning board. You don't need to ask me because I'll forget anyway, but I will remember when you're there. So let's have a bit of a conversation on that and then move on. Councillor Avery.
Sounds grand. But are we going to end up sort of saying it all now and then saying it all on the 6th of June?
I would hope our officers will tweak in line with whatever you have to say.
And sure.
And up to you. So, any initial comments? Or look, what we can do is we can try and do it all, or we can just go page by page and take your comments as we go. So I've got some comments. So let's do page, what is 11? So for me, item 1.4, 1.5, I think you need to tweak the tense. So it's forward looking, not past looking. So write it, if you like, 1.4 as when this SPT is a material consideration, and take out the at the present time on the next one, because nobody wants to read what we're going to do when we've done it. Item.
Sorry, Chairman, I've lost which page we were.
Page 11.
That's in the introduction.
Oh, in the introduction, okay.
Yeah. Anything else? Page 12. 13. Let me know if I'm going too quick, Jackie. 14. 15. Page 16, halfway through the bullet points, they don't wrap around properly. So I think it's the fourth bullet point appears as bullet points 4 and 5, and it should be one bullet point. So the break after individual and before settlement character needs to come out. Page 17. Item 310, I'm utterly confused as to the local plan evidence base, because you refer to different documents at different times. So I think you need to clarify which strategies we are actually basing this on, and ensure that we have the most up-to-date one in there, because I think, I can't remember, there's one where we talk about the infrastructure delivery plan 2018, and sometimes we talk about it being 2020. So we need to be clear on that, I think. Page 18. Page 19. I just don't understand why we're not applying this to all where we can. I'd sort of like to take out what we're not going to apply it to. I understand that developers might want to know, but I think we should be as broad as we can in this. And genuinely, we have a huge demand for extra care. And I accept some of these technically we can't do it, but I'd like to have as wide an envelope as we can to get as much as we can in this. Um, 4.7. In here, and a number of times, you refer to the community infrastructure levy, which is about to be abolished. I think we may as well tidy it up and take that out now. I mean, I'm perfectly happy with the 3 tests because they're just common sense, but I don't think we need to talk about the infrastructure levy. And in 4.9, I'm genuinely curious as to the evidence for a 20-minute drive or 15-minute drive, depending upon which sport it is. So when it comes to the playing ball, can you give us some more information over where the 15 and 20-minute drive element comes? And because what I'm conscious of is that we get the best that we can get, rather than we create, if you like, requirements that won't be delivered. So, if we ask for something, so everywhere's got something within 20 minutes of every house, we might not get what we want to do. So for me, it's more, that can be guidance, but I'm more focused on how much of what we want do we want. Anybody else on any of this?
Just on that same point, Chair, is that do we actually need to put that in? I know it sounds good, but that is my problem with this, that Polesworth and Dordon obviously is a key bit for me, and I'm sitting there going that if we go to developers and say we want a 3G football pitch, or we want, obviously we know about the new sports centre, but we want this part of it, there's developers can say, well, actually Atherstone has one which is 15 minutes away from Polesworth, so rock and roll in now. And I do agree with you that if we don't need that in, can we just take it out? It should be on a case-by-case basis of what the settlement needs, not by what's around 20 minutes or 25 minutes away.
It probably needs a lot more thought, doesn't it? Because the more you centralise, the more you can scale up and specialise in terms of the offer that you're going to make. And there is a tension, isn't there, between what can be done locally and what needs to be built in so that kids can play and this can be informal club or other small group activity versus the more. Well, we had that debate around acrobatics, didn't we? And in relation to Polesworth School, and I do think it needs some thinking through that. And the key to that is how accessible whatever central location that you choose is going to be, whether it's got parking or bus services and so on. So the more rigid you are, I guess, the more that potentially, ties your hands in terms of thinking of it on a borough-wide basis and on a local basis. So I guess I'm
with you both entirely on this, because on the one hand you want to set out your store saying I want everything with jam on top of it, and on the other hand you don't exactly, or is it cream first and then jam? But you want to set that out and have a big shopping list, but at the same time you don't make the shopping list so expensive that you won't actually get any of it. So that's why I'm not, if you like, saying take it in, take it out, just help me to understand it a bit more, I think. Page 20, for the first and only time, you refer to the Warwickshire, Coventry and Solihull Green Infrastructure Strategy Plan. If that's one of the documents that we're relying on, we need to put it in earlier, but I'm just not sure what it is. I don't think I've ever seen it. So if we can understand what that is. And you refer a few times to things being consented. I think what you mean is planning consent being granted. On page 22, I think that the distinction between demand generated for large, by large sites and by, if you like, the by 66 and by under 66 could be a bit clearer. I had to read that 3 or 4 times before I knew what we were looking at. So I think a bit of clarity in that would help.
Which point is that, sorry?
It's the table on page 22. Okay. Yes. And it's the second and third items. I just think we need to be a bit clearer on. Page 23, anybody? Page 24, I think item 4.34 needs to be a bit tweaked, because we talk about will not be used to subsidise a commercial profit distributing body. It might be that the local authority has a profit distributing body that distributes the profit back to the local authority. So let's be sure that we've got all of our options open. 25, anybody? Next point is page 27, right at the top. Possible approaches reflect the duty to cooperate, which is about to be abolished. So I think we need to reflect on that. My next is on 29. And again, it's this evidence-based, making sure we've got all of the stuff in there. Because that for example, doesn't talk about the Coventry and Warwickshire thing. And there is the reference to the development plan, October 2020, 2 paragraphs down, we say March 2018. Item 5.4 on that page, we specify where the development specific projects are. But to Dan's point earlier on, I think we could add in some sort of explanation, actually. I mean, we refer to it generally, but, we want this stuff everywhere, not just Atherstone, Manchester, Dordon, Polesworth, Arley and Arley and Kingsbury. I found the charts on page 31 impossible to read and understand. So if we're going to put those in, we need better quality. I just can't even see them. I know my eyes are dead. But, then for me on page 32, we've got to be clear what we need. Item 515 and item 516 are contradictory. In 515, we talk about no restriction on who can use the sports hall. And in 516, we talk about no/limited user restrictions. Let's just make that really clear. I think we mean limited. And then a more general point on item 522. I'm just wary that the quality guidelines that we set out on a number of these are too broad. Okay, believe me, I want the moon, but I don't want the moon to end up meaning that, you know, NASA says we can't get there. So I think I really would just encourage everyone to look at what it is we really want. For example, do we really need toilets at allotments? Because if I were a developer, I'd say, yeah, to an extent you need toilets, but if every allotment site has got to have paved footpaths and toilets, we'll probably never get any allotments. I'd just sort of be a bit more worldly wise, I guess, as to what I'd rather allotments without a paved footpath than no allotments.
Question, Chair, have any of our allotments got paved footpaths and toilets?
No, we've got toilets. Quite a lot of them have got composting toilets, and they work quite well, actually. And
actually, they're pretty cheap too.
They only cost about £1,000, but I don't know. There's an issue about whether you have to have planning permission to put one up. So I understand from talking to people that got composting toilets.
Well, at the back of the shed.
So I think, you know,
I think you need a toilet. If you're going to spend 2.5 hours doing your, allotment, you need a toilet. But it doesn't have to be a fully flushing, mains connected.
I wouldn't spend more than 20 minutes. But fair point. And this is just me showing my lack of understanding. But we say appropriately designed to enable recreational use by the whole community, including those with disabilities, understand that, or cultural restrictions, which I don't understand. I think that's broadly most of my comments, but I, as a general thing, I prefer us to put something in about what our preference actually is for some of this stuff. I think this is great in terms of setting out our broad agenda. But I haven't seen many references to informal leisure, dog walking particularly. And actually, that's what most people do. It's, as much as we try and get people to go to the sports hall and go to the multi-gym and go twirling on stuff, most of us, the leisure activities are dog walking. And I'd like to see a bit, that included, because that will benefit a lot more people. Informal recreation, I think, is where I'm saying. I don't wish to take out the other stuff. I just want to put a bit more in about that. We haven't really talked about bridleways, and we do have a lot of people who do that. And for me, I'd like a broader comment about connectivity. How will we use this policy or this design guidance to link footpaths and bridleways so that actually we've got a sensible route around? Because a lot of our footpaths and bridleways start nowhere and go nowhere.
You read further into this than I was able to in the time I had. I understand the need for detail. I understand the need for this is going to go for developers. What I'm left with as a borough council looking at this is I don't have a clear picture in my mind of what it is that we want for our leisure facilities. The vision. And it would be nice almost to have, I used to call them executive summaries or something like that, that just sets out on a page or 2 pages what our vision is for leisure facilities and open space facilities across the borough. So that if we read that and understand that, then all this fits in behind it. But at the moment, I haven't got that. You probably tell me somewhere that I could have read ages ago. Nothing. I should. But I that big picture, I haven't got this.
I think that's fair. I'm sure Dorothy will say, but you've got to look at the plain pitch strategy and the other strategies from the authority to get there. But I think we can have something in here that says broadly, this is it's almost me a hierarchy of needs. What do we really want? And every site is going to be individual, but I think there's more things that I want.
And that's the plan. That's what we want.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we need to be a little bit clearer over we want it, but we're not paying for it. So in some of the more local developments, there's one reference in here to resident management companies. I'd like to broaden that and say absolutely. You know, we want to design this in as part of the development, but actually a resident management scheme is a great method of giving people who are going to live there a real stake in how it's delivered, and B, a really clear method of how they pay for it too. Any other comments? So I didn't need to hog all that.
You read it, no?
What comes of two journeys to and from Euston?
Chairman, I have to confess, I haven't gone into it in any detail. I was assuming that if there was going to be a consultation, one would have an opportunity to feed that back, and that's work to be done. But there is one comment which generally is cropping up in relation to our leisure provision and, you know, new facilities and the way in which we take those forward, and that is the issue of climate change and the, you know, in terms of quality standards. We consume a huge amount of energy with our swimming pools and our leisure facilities, and I just don't get that sense that yet we've got a grip on how those are to become more energy efficient, and I would have thought that has to be somewhere built into the documentation about what we want in the future, if it's going to be done from you.
To say you haven't read it, you spotted something there. Actually, I think it would be a fair comment to draw that into it. Councillor Hayford?
Just to sort of go back to my first point in terms of the consultation, developers, they'll understand. They'll get all this. They'll go through this. They'll understand. The average parish council, if you're going to consult them on it, how many of those are going to wait to the 68 pages? If you're going to consult older residents and things, what their views are on open spaces and things, I just don't think this is a particularly easy document if you're going to have broader consultation other than just developers.
How would the consultation be done, sorry? You know, would we be like asking people what's more important to these people, or are we actually asking them to look through this document? Because there's bits that obviously we've sat here already and said that this is a bit odd, but I struggled. I think everybody else has struggled already on it. So passing it on to, as you say, the normal resident, I don't think the consultation will do very well, because I just don't think people will understand what they're reading or understand what actual effects it has. It's, you know, not being understand it, but the effects it has on what we do later on.
So perhaps some sort of executive summary at the start.
As I was originally suggesting, but there's something that could be framed in terms of vision. Do you agree with priorities in dog walking? You said mentioned once, twice, I don't know, but everybody walks their dogs if they've got one. They should do. Where do they go? And I don't know. It's a lot. Who do we expect to respond to the consultation, and have we made it easy for them to be able to do so?
Just to let you know, it's a joint document with the community development team. And so as part of the consultation, I was thinking that we would be doing some sort of community involvement in some way. We haven't spoken to the team to talk about exactly how that would be done. But your comments this evening, we'll take on board and we'll discuss them with the community development team. In terms of all the issues that you've raised this evening, again, we'll take them back to the community development team and Simon's team, and to go through those and see if we can either explain more why it's written the way that it is, or suggest changes as to how it can be changed in order to move forward. But we'll come back to you, and we'll definitely get that sorted before the 6th of June, before it comes back to board. In the paperwork for the 6th of June, it might be still this document, just because of the timeline, but would that be a particular issue, or would you particularly want it changing before?
Yeah, if you're going to ask the board to send it out for consultation, the board will genuinely want to see the version that's going out.
Okay, we'll see what we can do in that.
I think it was a point I was going to make as well, that I think that what Dorothy was making was that the publication date for the agenda is this Wednesday for the 6th of June because of the double bank holiday. So what it might mean is that, because that only gives one working day to get this turned around, that when it's published on Wednesday, it would have the documents as they stand, but we can prepare some additional papers, and as soon as they're ready, publish them.
Oh, I think that's perfectly reasonable.
So what members see first won't necessarily be the complete picture.
Does it have to be June? Does it have to be the June planning committee?
Can it go to July, I suppose?
We just set the timetable that we were aiming to go to the June board in order to go out for consultation before the school holidays. That was one of the reasons why. But I mean, we can take it to the July board, but we'll then just have to talk about whether, instead of a normal 6 weeks consultation, we might do it for a bit longer, just so that we can avoid.
That makes sense, Chair. I think to simply have this in its current form presented to the planning committee with all the points you mentioned, things we've discussed, it seems a bit pointless. I think, as you say, we want to be approving in planning committee. Should we approve it? We're going to approve it in planning committee. The thing that is actually going to go out.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Councillor Hayfield's point about that this is almost like a technical reference document that can be used by planners to have that dialogue with developers. You know, do you meet this paragraph when you're talking about the master plan that you're going to put forward for Dordon and Polesworth in terms of spaces and so on? And I don't think that the public can respond to what is a detailed technical reference document. I think the point that how are we going to genuinely consult on this? And I do think it's important to consult. I mean, the idea of, well, what do, you know, if you take, almost what you need is almost like a little cameo. Take a village of 2,000. What, if you're going to audit, community audit, what should be in place against these standards? Is there a bench you can sit on if you're elderly? Is there a place you can walk your dogs easily? And is there, you know, but you wouldn't necessarily expect a swimming pool. And it's almost like it paints some pictures of and assess your community against these standards, and then you'd get something genuine back as to where the gaps are and where the things that are really positive about those communities. So I think that process of consultation needs quite a lot of thinking about, but extracting the best of what's in here and distilling it so that people can then respond.
Could I endorse what Jackie said? I think, particularly if you want, you're going to get developers to try and cough up with some of this. If it's actually got community buy-in to it, if we can demonstrate through a number of responses that this is actually what the community is looking for, or the different communities are looking for, it strengthens our hands in terms of developers and things, rather than something that's been sort of, forgive me, I think, dreamt up by officers in the best interest of North Warwickshire, with all the technical stuff that goes with that. You know, if our parish councils and everything else is.
So I hope that was helpful. I just say, Mark, it was or it wasn't. I will come back to you. I'm quite relaxed over how you present it to the planning board. But instinctively, planning board won't approve some of the consultation until they've actually seen the draft. Whether that is, it's on the agenda and a sort of revised version is circulated. My colleagues absolutely correct focus on the environment. I wouldn't bother sticking this in the agenda if it's going to change, because that's just cutting trees down to no great value. I also absolutely agree we need a longer period. If this were a 6-week consultation out of the main summer holiday period, I'd be sort of more relaxed about it. But June, July, August, we know is, half the people aren't going to be here for at least part of that. Okay, they're probably only going to wait for 2 weeks, but it could be the 1-2 weeks. So I would be tempted to think about it a bit further. Mr. Dipman, so you were going to say something?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was really just to reiterate and focus on what Councillor Chambers said, is that the primary focus, obviously, at the document and how it will be used will be by developers and by the planning officers, the development management officers, to effectively, as you will see through the calculator, to calculate the requirements for each site as it comes forward. And just to stress that, obviously, because of the 10, the major development cut-off, which is 10, it'll be all applications from 10 houses and above. So obviously not all of them will come to the planning board, but we do want to have that working document that we can use and that we can grab, as want of a better word, or focus on as much contributions from the developments that we're faced as we can get. But I was very encouraged with some of the points that you were raising, and also that James raised, particularly about the reference with the resident management groups, because that is an area I know that has been mentioned in the past, and the community services team were interested in. So I'll focus on that as well, and speak to Becky and see if we can get some sort of more buy-in or more clarity on that area as well.
Thank you. Any other comments, members? So I'll formally move the recommendations.
Second. Just going to say, do you want to just give a bit more scope in that, because you said about the timing? You're proposing amending to the 6th of June. Would you want to amend it to say, or next convenient meeting when the work's good, something along those lines?
I think yes, that'll be good. So we change the 6th of June to next convenient meeting.
Yes.
So proposed.
Second.
All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. Members, officers, thank you very much indeed for your time. That was good meeting. And see you all next time. Or in fact, Councillor Riley will see you all next time.
Yeah.